The number of bodies recovered of people killed when a boat sank off the eastern coast of Venezuela has risen to 28. The UN Secretary General has appealed to rich nations to support the purchase of coronavirus vaccines for poor countries and refrain from hoarding doses for themselves. More than 300 kidnapped Nigerian schoolboys have been released and handed to the government. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. In Venezuela, the number of bodies recovered of people killed when a boat sank off the eastern coast of the country has reached 28. According to the Attorney General's office, 26 bodies have been identified and returned to their families. The Interior Ministry reported that 11 bodies had been recovered in the past 24 hours. The ministry added that 40 people were thought to have been aboard the boat, which was headed to Trinidad and Tobago. Attorney General Tarek William Saab said that 2 individuals had been arrested for the crime of human trafficking, while relatives of the victims had requested that all groups refrain from politicising the incident.
Unfortunately, I would like to report that the number has now reached 28 in total, of which 26 are already identified and 2 are yet to be identified.
And the Venezuelan Attorney General Tarek William Saab reported that 2 of the people responsible for the sinking of the boat, in which at least 28 people died, were arrested.
We already have 2 detainees to be handed over right now to the authorities and charged based on the law. I also want to emphasize that these 2 citizens, both of them, and this is very revealing, both have criminal records and convictions for drug trafficking. They are people who have unfortunately reoffended. They also have a record of trafficking in illegal arms and aggravated theft.
The Attorney General also informed that his office has ordered the arrest of at least 7 officials of the National Guard who reported for alleged extortion of the people who were travelling in the boat.
So they literally extorted them. They told them that in order not to report this matter to the prosecutor's office, they had to pay $4,500. They had $3,000 in cash. They gave that amount, and the remaining $1,500 were collected through the seizure of one of the boat's engines. In this way, and after conducting the necessary investigations, after certifying that these people, upon being detained, subsequently reported this incident to the local military prosecutor's office, we have requested arrest warrants against 7 officials of the coastal surveillance station of Huidia.
And Venezuelan Attorney General Tarek William Saab highlighted the manipulation of information regarding the shipwreck off the eastern coast of the country.
The difficulties caused by the coercive measures imposed on our country that have also led many people in the area to migrate to Trinidad, if we add the avalanche of propaganda through social networks and media that incite, even fool many of our young people and the most vulnerable families to this kind of exodus, this is yet another details that negatively impacts.
In Bolivia, the Indigenous Council of the Quilasuya region demanded the launch of an investigation to establish the accountability of the former de facto president Janine Áñez for the coup of November last year and for violating indigenous institutions. Our correspondent Freddy Morales has the story.
Indigenous Aymaras peoples from La Paz province's highlands arrived at Murillo Square, the country's political center, to demand sanctions against those who seized the government and invaded its institutions.
First of all, we want to bring to justice President of the Transition, Ms. Áñez, because she has been responsible for the repression in Sencata, in Sencabo, for the deaths of our sisters and brothers. Therefore, we as indigenous people of La Paz province, we are asking for a trial of responsibilities right now.
The Council of Aylus and markers of the Quilasuya CONAMAC denounced that officials of the de facto government took their institutions and sacked them, demanding a return to normality without impunity.
We want to have a better future for next generations. We have to manage ourselves, redirect the past of Suma Camaña, live well, it is what we demand. And also the Acullico is a place for debate and exchange ideas.
They recalled that one of the symbolic actions of the coup d'etat was the entrance of the then civic leader of Santa Cruz, Fernando Camacho, with a Bible to the government palace, with the speech that God, in that way, was returning to that place.
The same way the Spanish arrived with the priests, the same place where they arrived, the Cerro Rico of Potosí. What for? To plunder it. Last year they arrived in a similar way, grabbing the Bible to massacre the Bolivian people, especially the native indigenous peasants people like us. They have trampled on us. We're very proud to be women of Pollera or Cola Paseña. For that reason we're here in Murillo Square, defending our culture, our ideology, our clothing.
After the coup d'etat in November last year, the de facto government took over the offices of several trade unions and indigenous organizations and appointed new leaders. It also confiscated equipment from dozens of community radio stations run by unions or indigenous organizations.
Freddy Morales, TeleSUR, Bolivia.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres on Thursday appealed to rich nations to support the purchase of coronavirus vaccines for poor countries and refrain from hoarding doses for themselves.
To make a vaccine available to everybody, everywhere, and affordable by everybody, everywhere. Now, to reach that, there are two things that are essential. First, to fully fund the COVAX. We have a gap of 5 billion. At the present moment, the activities are going on, but we have a gap of $5 billion until the end of January, and a global gap of more than 20 billion that needs to be addressed in the context of the program. And at the same time, I see countries that have bought more vaccines than several times the volume of their population, or at least made bids in that regard. Of course, governments have the obligation to protect their peoples, but they cannot protect their peoples if other peoples are not protected, and nature always strikes back.
Poland's health minister announced that the country will go into a 3-week partial lockdown from December 28th, with shopping centres and ski slopes closed, as well as travel restrictions on New Year's Eve.
In addition to the current restrictions that remain in force, we are closing the hotels also for business guests. For New Year's Eve, we want to limit travel. These restrictions will apply from 9 p.m. on December 31st to 6 a.m. the next day. All persons arriving in Poland by public transport will have to remain in quarantine for 10 days. If the third wave and the risk it generates materializes, we can be sure that unfortunately our health system will not be efficient and capable of treating all the sick quickly.
With the arrival of cold and foggy winter weather amid the COVID-19 pandemic, countries in Eastern Europe, such as Bosnia, are facing an extra respiratory health hazard in the form of air pollution. The Balkan nation, as well as its neighbour Serbia and European Union members Poland and Croatia, traditionally report high levels of dangerous pollution from heating in winter months. However, this year the problem is coupled with soaring COVID-19 infections. Bosnia's capital, Sarajevo, on Thursday was enveloped in thick smog, as authorities warned high-risk groups to reduce activity and told schools to keep children inside. Dirty air is a chronic problem in the city of some 270,000, which is located in a narrow valley surrounded by mountains. The United Nations has warned in previous years that people in all major cities across the Western Balkans face alarming levels of air pollution that are reducing their life expectancies.
What can I say? We have this pressure from two sides now, one pressure from COVID-19 and another from polluted air, especially if you have kids. It's terrible. Smoke is dangerous for children and coronavirus is dangerous for older people. People really have to take care of themselves. There is great pressure on people on their life today here. Maybe we are in luck now because we are all wearing masks so we can feel the stench of this fog. It's usual for us to live in smoke like this. I don't really know how they measure the pollution, but we are definitely among the most polluted cities.
The Spanish Congress this Thursday approved a bill on the right to euthanasia. The plenary of the Congress of Deputies, the lower house of Parliament, gave majority backing to the bill with 198 votes in favour, 138 against and 2 abstentions. The bill will now go to the Senate to continue the debate and, if approved, could come into force from February or March 2021. This would make Spain the 6th country in the world to recognise the right to a dignified death, after the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, Canada and New Zealand. In Switzerland, assisted suicide for non-selfish motives is also legal. On Thursday, Russia's President Vladimir Putin called opposition leader Alexei Navalny an agent of US special services and denied accusations of Russian hackers meddling in US elections.
It's not some kind of investigation, it's just the legalization of materials provided by U.S. Special Services. Don't we know that they track locations? Our special services understand and know it well. Our servicemen from FSB and other special agencies know it as well and use cell phones where they think it's not necessary to hide their location. If this is right, and I assure you that this is right, it means that this German hospital's patient relies on the support of U.S. Special Services. If Navalny is supported by U.S. Special Services, then it's interesting and Special Services have to look after him. But it doesn't mean that it's necessary to poison him. Who cares about him? If we wanted, we would have made it done. His wife asked me and I immediately ordered to let him go for treatment to Germany. Russian hackers didn't help the incumbent at the moment U.S. president to get elected during elections in 2016 and didn't meddle into internal affairs of this great country. This is speculations, an excuse to spoil relations between Russia and the United States. It's an excuse not to admit the legitimacy of the incumbent president of the United States that was caused by internal political issues.
The Russian Foreign Minister condemned the United States and some of its allies for imposing criminal unilateral sanctions on Syria during a meeting with his Syrian counterpart in Moscow this Thursday.
Solving problems about the country's socio-economic development, solving issues met by the Syrian people in the COVID-19 situation are hindered by criminal unilateral sanctions which have been imposed on Syria by the United States and some of their allies. Besides, we denounce the continuing illegal presence of foreign military contingents in the Syrian territory. When we see that the United States steals our oil, occupies our territory, supports some non-national movements when they illegally enter on our territory, disrespecting our sovereignty, all this contradicts the United Nations Organization's resolutions. And this doesn't aim to the restoration of Syria. On the contrary, this aims to the destruction of Syria.
The U.S. State Department Special Envoy for Syria admitted to helping Republican donors score a deal for Syrian oil at a congressional hearing on Wednesday. Special Envoy Joel Rayburn confirmed during Wednesday's House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing the deal with the company Delta Crescent Energy, a little-known firm co-founded by several people who've donated to Republican causes, including the campaign of Senator Lindsey Graham. Graham first announced in July that US-backed Kurdish-led forces had granted an American company a deal to modernize the oil fields in areas of northeastern Syria guarded by US troops. Americans are currently banned from dealing with Syrian oil under US economic sanctions on Syria, and Delta Crescent Energy is the only firm known to have been granted an exception to the sanctions by the US Treasury Department. More than 300 kidnapped Nigerian schoolboys have been released and handed to the government. A spokesman for the governor of Katsina State, where the boys were abducted, said the 344 freed were in a good condition and would soon be reunited with their families. The spokesman added that none of the kidnapped group were killed. However, it was unclear whether all the boys are now accounted for. The attack was claimed by Boko Haram, which this Thursday released a video apparently showing some of the boys. Boko Haram has been notorious over the last decade for school kidnappings, including in Chibok in 2014, when nearly 300 schoolgirls were seized. However, these abductions have until now taken place in the northeast, where Boko Haram is based. The International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies launched an emergency appeal on Thursday for 2.7 million Swiss francs to support over 117,000 vulnerable people affected by floods in South Sudan. According to the Federation, the support would help those in the hardest hit states of the country after heavy rainfall earlier this month. Over 1 million people have been affected by floods in Sudan this year, including 481,000 who've been displaced. The ICRC warned of increasing risks of hunger and disease and a lack of access to proper medical care. A coordinator of the organisation's food distribution programme said it was providing food items such as sorghum, cooking oil and salt, as well as kitchen essentials and tents.
It's estimated that over 50,000 people have been affected by floods. Of course, given the limited capacity of bringing assistance here, we had to choose the most vulnerable and the severely affected areas in the region. So we decided with the community leaders that 3,500 households, that is over 21,000 individuals that are worst affected by the flood would be assisted by the ICRC. Basically, we're distributing food, sorghum, cooking oil and salt, and we're distributing also non-food items which are essential for the household: kitchen set, blankets, mat, tarpaulin, for them to be able to set up a temporary shelter.
Residents of the border town of SHIPWREAK in southeast Benin welcomed the reopening of the border with Nigeria, which had been closed since August 2019, after the Nigerian president announced a measure to curb the smuggling of rice and other commodities.
They opened the border yesterday and we are all happy. But since this morning, Nigerian customs officers have been turning people away, saying that the border is not open yet, and we got into trouble again because we are suffering too much. But when they opened yesterday, people started to come, but now they are turning people back again. I've been in SEME for over 22 years, but I can tell you that this closure has stopped many things. No more work, and it's been a mess, but we are very happy for the opening. I'm happy for this reopening, and I pray that the border will remain this way for many years to come. May God bless African leaders, and may Africa once again be more united.
Saudi Arabia has kicked off its COVID-19 vaccination campaign, with the kingdom's health minister receiving the first dose a week after authorities approved the Pfizer vaccine. The Saudi health minister said the government is confident of the safety of the vaccine, vowing that all citizens in the nation would get injections free of charge. Authorities said they would give priority to health workers, citizens and residents aged over 65 and those with underlying health conditions in the first phase of the rollout. The government did not specify how many shots had been received, but said it plans to vaccinate at least 70% of the population by the end of next year.
Today is the beginning of the relief from the pandemic crisis. Thank God. I give my thanks and gratitude to the custodian of the two holy mosques for sponsoring the largest immunization campaign in the history of the kingdom. During the last 9 months, I was worryingly following the number of infections. Today, I will start happily following the number of people who got vaccinated. I took the vaccine, thank God, in the first vaccination center, which includes more than 550 clinics, to ensure that there are enough clinics to give the largest possible number of vaccines. We will have vaccination centers in all areas of the kingdom.
China's foreign ministry on Thursday hailed the Chang'e 5 mission as a major step forward for China's space industry after the probe's capsule successfully returned to Earth with samples of soil and rock from the moon.
As the most complex project of China's aerospace system with the largest technological span, Chang'e 5 marks a major step forward of China's aerospace industry and will contribute to deepening of mankind's scientific understanding of the origin of the moon and the evolution of the solar system. The Chang'e 5 lunar exploration mission has received support and assistance from relevant countries and international organizations, including the European Space Agency, Argentina, Namibia, and Pakistan. China expresses its heartfelt appreciation to them. China always upholds the principle of non-interference in other countries' internal affairs. The allegation that China swayed the U.S. presidential elections is purely fabricated out of nothing.
And we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And you can also follow us on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.